So okay guys, this is my first ever Pi 3B portable console and I'm going to show you how I made it. Overall, this project is fairly simple, and as always I'll provide all links and 3D models and parts that I used in the description if you guys wish to replicate this current Pi 3B portable as shown in the video. Now with that said, I begin by printing out a case that can fit my 3.5 inch HDMI plug-and-play display as well as the Pi itself. This was easy enough to do. I just grabbed a model from Thingiverse, pretty much reskinned it, removed some parts I didn't like, added in a SD card spot so I can easily swap in and out SD cards, and I pretty much attached a box to the front of that. I could have been a little bit more fancy, maybe make it more of a design and reminiscence of a Game Boy. However, for the final feel and use of it, it feels pretty good to hold, so I decided to stick with it. I printed out this 12-hour print, and as you can see, it came out pretty good. Now from here, I flip over my Raspberry Pi 3B and I wire up some wires. They don't really need to be a specific length yet, so I'd rather err on the side of too long than too little. So cut your wires out and solder them up via the diagram that's on the screen right now. From there, I also soldered on some power wires used for powering up the Pi later. I'll have a diagram and picture on screen as to where those get wired up. But basically, I wired everything up. I nicely wrapped all the wires together and organized them, slid them through the hole in the case, and out the other side. Now from here, we have what looks like a Game Boy starting to form. All we need to do now is print the LCD cover and the front panel and buttons, and from there, we print out the PCB spacers, and we wait for our proto board to show up. In my case, that took about a month, and that was not a fun part of the project, but I got my proto board. I wired it up, and to get the wiring and the button placement exact, I used a template. The template I got from the front panel of the unit. I basically printed it out halfway and then stopped it. However, I'll provide a file that you could just print. It's a couple layers thick. It will be just thick enough that you could stick it to your proto board, use it for tracing. Although if you don't feel like printing that out, you can easily do a paper print version where you print that out, tape it to the front of the proto board, and stick your buttons through it in order to get your buttons nicely positioned right where you need them. In my case, I used these 2-pin tack switches. You can use 4-pin tack switches, just keep in mind they work a little bit differently. However, some tack switches work better than others, and I think I would have used something else in my particular build, but hopefully when I play it enough and in time, they'll feel a bit better. But yeah, I put the buttons in. I used some jumper wire on the same side as the buttons itself to do a nice clean look. Wired all the grounds together, and from there I began soldering. I tested occasionally with the multimeter to make sure that their ground connection is secure on all buttons, and in fact I did do a mess up. I think one of the jumper wires fell out while I was working on this, and I missed a ground connection, so I had to do a bodge on top of the board itself, or a mod it's known as. And that fixed the ground connection, and from there I can hook up the wires from the Raspberry Pi itself up to all the pins that are available on the back of the proto board. Now it sounds complex, but overall it really is not. This is the first time I've ever used proto board and did any kind of wiring like this, and I'd like to say it came out pretty good, especially when I used pretty much a broken rundown soldering iron on this whole project. Anyway, once I got all my wires on there, I aligned it with the front panel of the unit itself, and I made sure that the drill markings and the PCB spacers all aligned, because from here, you need to add some super glue on, align everything, wait for that to dry, and optionally, I actually suggest it, use some stronger glue, like a 2-part epoxy, to secure the buttons to the front part of the front panel, I should say. Keep in mind, you're going to be putting some force on this when you game. You're going to be pushing them buttons in. You want to make sure it can hold up. So I'd rather err on the side of too much glue than too little. But once you got everything glued in, you can use screws to screw the PCB board on. And you can unscrew the PCB board if you ever decide you wish you want to change the buttons out, or you want to do some other kind of mod to the circuit. Anyway, I got the battery. I wired it up to this UPS charge boost circuit I found. It can let you play and pretty much charge at the same time for most things. However, if you do some more demanding games, you might draw more amps out than you're able to put in. so you may drain the battery more so than charge it. I don't know, I'll have to test that out a bit more, but thankfully I wired that up in such a way that I can easily measure the current draw. I basically connected the battery's positive wire to a switch, and then the other side of that switch to the battery in on the UPS module itself. This seems unorthodox. It means there's no safe shutdown when it comes to flipping the switch. You'll have to safely shut it down before you flip the switch in order to turn it off. But I like doing this kind of wiring because it makes measuring the current draw way easy to do. Anyway, from here I tested it all out before I decided to desolder everything and solder it all up in the case with as little wire as I possibly could get away with. I did want to aim this thing more up and towards the front of the unit so I could see when it's charging. However, I decided to aim it more upside down and towards the bottom of the case. And that, oddly enough, is a pretty good location because when I plug this thing in, I could see whether it's charging or not, or when it's full, from the back of the case, it will light up. But yeah, that's basically it. This is my Pi 3B portable. Again, things are not perfect. There are some things I'd like to change. I'd rather have used a rear view LCD backup monitor like you would get in a car, for instance. And other than that, I would probably use a strip board instead of proto board for the buttons on the D-pad. I'd rather use an actual authentic rubber D-pad. You could easily do that. You don't need to use the proto board. The proto board is just okay for the buttons pretty much. For the D-pad, it's serviceable, but I would rather have changed that out. Anyway, that's basically it for this video. I hope I was able to inspire you, and I hope it was able to help you out. TTPK is signing off. Peace. Port, and you can see why that's a problem. I can't plug in my adapters now or charge my phone with it, and it will put our card into monitor mode, which it's already in monitor mode, and